Hello, hello, and welcome to Gut Feelings, your go-to podcast for advice on matters of the head, heart, and health. I am your host, Lo Bosworth, the founder of women's wellness brand, Love Wellness. You can find us at Walmart in digestive health, Target in natural beauty and women's OTC, Ulta in bath on Amazon, and of course at lovewellness.com. On this show, we answer your head, heart, and health advice questions like your best friend would. We're all about building an open community here. So if you have a particularly tough or awkward question for us, that's okay, ask away. As you may know, tough and awkward is what we do best here at Love Wellness. So with that, let's dive into your questions and today's guest. All right, everybody, today another medical expert on the show because you all have been loving our medical expert episodes. You guys are letting us know in the comments what you want to talk about. So joining me right now is none other than board certified dermatologist, Mohs surgeon, and media expert, Dr. Dendy Engelman. Dr. Dendy also has extensive training and experience in cosmetic dermatology, including, and some of these things we're going to talk about today, neurotoxins, injectable fillers, chemical peels. So I have a lot of questions for her. You guys have a lot of questions for her. So join me now in welcoming Dr. Dendy to Gut Feelings. Hi, Dr. Dendy. I'm so happy to have you on Gut Feelings. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. This is exciting.
Also, you look gorgeous and I look like a trash bag today. So
I have to go to a fashion show later, so otherwise I would not be all.
Oh my goodness. I love that for you. Yeah, I have, for anybody listening, there was a big snowstorm in New York City today. And so we decided to work from home and I'm still in my pajamas, but Dr. Dendy, it looks like she's at the office and she's ready to go. I love that. So I want to just jump right into our questions. So first up, I want to talk about health out of the gate. And we get a lot of advice questions from our listeners about Botox. And I know that you are a Botox expert. You are a board certified dermatologic surgeon. And I think that you really have your finger on the pulse. So I want your insight onto Botox trends. I want to talk about calf talks. I want to talk about trap talks. I want to talk about Botox in all parts of the body that I don't know you can put Botox into those parts of the body. And then I want your opinion, your medical opinion on like, is it safe? Is it interesting? Because I saw calf talks recently and I was like, this is going too far. So what do you think?
Well, I've had it. I can give you a picture. I have enormous calves. I mean,
Really?
I played 6 sports in high school and played volleyball in college, and they served me well then. And I live in heels, so I'm certainly not doing myself any favors with making them smaller. So let's talk about this trend because I agree with you. It's been literally head to toe. I think I pioneered, speaking of heads, scalp, we called it Botox, scalp Botox, where people were sweating a lot. And it really kind of got sensationalized into like the Upper East Siders who didn't want to mess up their blowout, but they wanted to go to SoulCycle. And so they didn't want their scalp to sweat. But really the way it came to be was for a therapeutic indication from a teacher. And her classroom wasn't air conditioned. And she was like, I'm so embarrassed because I sweat so much out of my scalp that I'm drenched and my hair looks like I've been swimming. And like the children were kind of making fun of her. And so that's how we first started to apply Botox in non-FDA approved indications in sites that we know, from the aesthetic cosmetic use of Botox. We can use it for between the eyes, the forehead, the crow's feet. But hyperhidrosis or excessive sweating, it's FDA cleared for hands, feet, and under the arms. That's it. Every time you bring a new medicine to market, especially in the derm space, we love to immediately think where else we can use it, even if it hasn't been FDA approved yet, because obviously we understand that the mechanism of action is going to work in different ways. So for minimizing musculoskeletal things like casts, put in a lot. Traps as well. I've
had trap talks and I love my trap talks. I talked about this on the podcast and people flipped out, but I thought it was really interesting and it improved my confidence. So I'm curious about calf talks. Like, how many people are coming into your practice to request this? Like, I'm so curious.
I've only had two since it was kind of made viral. I actually had it years ago because they were doing that in Asia. And I will say that, based on certain geographic norms or aesthetics and what is considered more beautiful, in Korea, obviously, they often will pioneer the beauty space. If you think about a whole category of K-beauty, following all their steps. They also are often trendsetters in the aesthetic world. And so a smaller calf is considered more beautiful in certain countries. And so that's where it was started. And you have to do a lot in order to truly slim that muscle, because it's a very large, obviously functional one, but you have the caveat of not overdoing it. It's kind of like when we do it in the masseter. That's a functional muscle. Like, you want to have enough of an effect so that patients stop grinding or that they have some minimal slimming, but you don't want to totally disengage that muscle, because then you can't chew. And we need that muscle for functional human behavior. Disengage fully the frown lines, there's not going to be any functional component except for that you can't communicate that you're concerned or upset. Same with crow's feet. But in these muscles that are critical for human behavior, like chewing or walking, you need to be mindful of the dosage to get an appropriate effect, but not an overdose, so that there is too much of an effect where you are tripping when you're trying to ambulate. So I would just, for your listeners, and even for my patients, when I'm telling them, especially with trap tots, like, are we looking for a stress relief, like into a trigger point, which certainly people will talk about the functional benefit of that, or are we looking for an aesthetic reduction, because that is a big muscle and it takes a lot more to help to slim that. And it's a slower onset than you would get with the cosmetic usage, for example, on the crow's feet. That usually is like between 10 and 14 days, you see the effects. With these bigger muscles, it takes longer to see the slimming. I don't know if that was your experience with trap talks or not.
Yeah, it definitely took more time. Why is that? Is it because the muscle is bigger? Like, I'm curious, like, functionally, like, why?
So our skeletal muscles obviously are bigger and are going to require more dosage, higher units, in order to disengage the neuromuscular firing and the communication between the nerve and the muscle. And when we disengage that, it takes time to atrophy. We're really trying to induce slimming or atrophy of those muscles. Same here and here. And so when they're bigger muscles, it just takes longer to see. But the benefit is, on the flip side, even though the onset takes longer, it often takes longer to overcome and regain that strength. So the longevity on the tail end is longer than it would be, say, for your frown lines or your crow's feet.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. On the show, I've had a number of medical experts come on, and I like to talk about kind of controversial medical practices and things like that. And I think our audience really likes it also. They have a lot of opinions. I had a friend, Dr. So on, and we talked about GLP-1s recently, and I feel like we broke our comment section. So I'm under the assumption that talking about things like calf talks will have the same effect on sort of our audience. And I'm curious to kind of go down the rabbit hole a little bit on kind of these, I don't know how you say it, I'm going to butcher it, so correct me, these like off-label uses for Botox and things that aren't FDA approved. And I was hoping that you could kind of talk about what it means to have something be FDA approved. Because like at Love Wellness, supplements are regulated by the FDA, but they're not approved by the FDA per se. And I don't think that there's broad consumer understanding of what these regulatory bodies really do, what's legal, what's illegal, like what you can actually sort of do with some of these different, medications or approaches to like cosmetic, and or functional treatments. So I'm curious, like, what your opinion is just generally on sort of off-label use of Botox. And listen, I have trap talks, I do this kind of stuff. So I'm curious how you think about it and how you implement some of these practices, I guess, within your medical practice.
I think that this is a very important point to discuss for the general consumer, because I think you're right. In the medical world or the prescription drug world versus the supplement world is very different. And being regulated by the FDA is different than being approved, studied, tested, and then kind of vetted by the governing body. And so let's just speak to the medical side for a minute and talk about, like, for example, the FDA approved sites for cosmetic usage of Botox, and that is glabella frontalis and crow's feet. And that's it. And
That's it?
yeah. And that's only with Botox. The other toxins they have fewer indications because it costs millions of dollars to get patients enrolled to prove the efficacy,
Yes.
to show the onset, to show the potential for side effects. And so these companies know that we as scientists, once we have been shown through clinical studies and FDA approval that something is safe and effective in a space, we immediately start to think, well, where else can we use it? And obviously we are taking a lot of the burden onto ourselves because it's not FDA approved for certain indications. For example, mesoteric Botox to slim the jawline, or to minimize teeth grinding or TMJ pain. But we, as clinicians, that we're willing to do that because we know that if you've demonstrated that these things work and are safe in certain areas, it doesn't mean that it wouldn't be otherwise. It's figuring out the dose and knowing what's appropriate. And that's why you want to go to people who are, very well trained, very knowledgeable, know human anatomy, know facial anatomy, know neuroanatomy, know pharmacology. There's a lot that goes into using these neurotoxins that are in chemical warfare. I mean, they're not for the neophyte, and it isn't just a paint by numbers kind of game. So you do want to pick your injector so that you trust when they say, this isn't approved, but this is how I've been using it. And I found great success in X, Y, or Z. And that's where Trap Tox came from. That's where Scalp Tox came from. That's where Calf Tox has now come from. And so it's very important, I think, when you're having a medicine injected into you, that it has been vetted as safe, first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
The Hippocratic Oath, the first day we start medical school, we take the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm. And that's first and foremost. Make sure that what you're having injected is safe and obviously effective so that you're not just wasting your money. The supplement world is hopefully becoming a little bit more regulated. It used to be the wild, wild west when I was in medical school, where you didn't even know if you were getting the active ingredient that was on the bottle in the
Right.
bottle. And then the amount could vary wildly from capsule to capsule, whether you may have been getting 2% of the active ingredient or 200%, and it could be in the same bottle. And then obviously there were heavy metals and potential contaminants. So that was kind of deemed unsafe. Obviously we're getting better, but they aren't held to the same standards as different pharmaceuticals where they have to prove efficacy and effect. And so oftentimes, and you see this a lot in the supplement world, these claims are very big and they promise the world, and patients throw money at it trying to solve for a problem they have. Hair loss is one where there's a lot of snake oil in hair. They see that people are desperate and they will come to me with like 90 different over-the-counter supplements they bought, just praying that one of them is going to work. And so I do think we are not doing the general consumer any great service by, the marketing claims that aren't backed up by science. So I always caveat to my patients, like, vet the science. And if you don't have it, bring it to me. I'll help you, because it is a hard world to navigate. You get overwhelmed if you go into a supplement store or even to Whole Foods where you feel like everything in there must be healthy and safe.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, I live and breathe the supplement space, and the things that I see and we navigate every day is so interesting. Gummy vitamins is like, they're my sworn enemy. The efficacy is not there in gummies. It's really hard for contract manufacturers to put in the amount that they say is going to be of, the ingredient. Typically you only get the benefit from one ingredient. So if you could get a gummy that has like 6 ingredients making claims, like, you're not really getting the efficacy there. And it's interesting, it really falls on brands in the supplement space to I think, take on the same idea of do no harm, right? And create products with transparency, sourcing that are being tested to the highest ingredient standards. And what's really interesting is that it's falling on brands now to do
Self-governed.
clinical studies,
Yeah.
self-governed, but also do clinical studies of their own. So we are undergoing clinical studies on a huge amount of our products this year, because not only is it the right thing to do, it's important to be able to prove that your products are safe and effective. And the category is like, it's interesting when it comes to the FDA, because if you understand like regulatory in this space, you understand things like the OTC monograph, like medical device approval processes, all these really complicated, really expensive and time consuming processes that have been established by governing bodies in this country, but that are really hard to nail for both brands and I think like the medical community, right? And so, like, getting a new drug approved, to your point, can take $1 billion in 20 years, right? And so it's really on brands to, like, in our space, to do our best and to deliver what we say we're going to deliver to consumers.
Well, no, I like it.
Yeah, total sidebar from calf talks, but it's one of my favorite subject matters is to talk about regulatory.
Well, everything that you're saying though is how I counsel patients when they're like, how do I know? I'm like, look for the clinicals. If they're not on their website, that means that the company isn't putting their money where their mouth is to prove to you. Anyone can say this works. If you have to show that it works, it's expensive. It takes time. It takes effort. But that really is the supplement world holding themselves to a different standard than the industry does at this moment. And that they really believe in their product. And so that in and of itself will eliminate a lot of supplement brands. So I applaud you for holding yourself to a standard that the industry doesn't at this point. Hopefully they will. But, we have to think about all the things we're putting to our body. And this is on a daily basis. So we want to not only protect our investment, but also make sure that we're not having any harmful exposures.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so let's move on to our next question. So typically we answer on the show questions of the health, head, and heart. And head questions typically are about, jobs or finances or whatever. But I want to talk about our literal heads. Okay. And I want to talk about all of the things that we're putting on our scalps to make our hair grow.
Okay.
Because I have the sense that you know a lot about this. And I want to have the snake oil conversation, interestingly enough, about like what's legit and what's not legit in hair growth. Because there's so many things you can do, right? You can take a supplement. You can put argan oil on. You can massage in all of these things. You can get lasers. You can get PRP. So in your practice, what do you do? What do you see work? What has surprised you? I'm very curious.
Well, I will say, just to answer from the top line, things that work in my hands are, pharmaceutical approved medicines like minoxidil, either topically or orally. And that's a new one that I've really started prescribing a lot more to men and to women. Propecia, which has been out for years, used to be kind of the first line therapy for men who would come in who were concerned about hair loss. But then there were a lot of sexual side effects that hadn't originally been discussed with patients, with the providers during the original studies. And so once it was launched and after time, there happened to be a lot of men who were presenting with, side effects that they weren't super proud to share. And so it took a while to uncover that. So then in the clinical discussion, when I was talking to men, because it was really only safe in men or not women of childbearing age, when she discussed that was a fairly significant side effect risk, then, that prescriptions started to fall off, understandably, because that wasn't something they were willing to undergo. And that's actually the brand origin story for why Nutrafol came about. One of the founders actually was experiencing hair loss and then also had sexual side effects from Propecia. And he was like, there's got to be something else. It's either I keep my hair and lose my girlfriend, or at least keep my girlfriend and lose my hair. And so he came up with, a nutraceutical based drug-free option to help support hair growth. And I will say that those formulators do a really good job of treating it as if it were an FDA-approved medication, or they do hair count and they do scalp biopsies, and they really are very specific in proving that their medications work. Obviously, topical minoxidil is great as well. If you didn't want to do an oral route, 5% for men or women is great. It used to be Rogaine for women, and it was 5. And they found that there was no change in the side effect profile, but much better efficacy if you were up to 5%. And then I would say that in office, we do PRP. I have great results with it. It just hurts. It's a bunch of needles in your scalp. And
tell listeners what PRP is.
Okay. The PRP
and the application on the scalp and why it works, because it's very interesting.
Yes. So PRP stands for platelet-rich plasma, and what happens is we draw your blood just like if you were giving blood, and then we spin down the blood that we have and take off the red blood cells and just use the plasma that's then injected into the scalp. We also, if you've heard of the vampire facial, that plasma is used either for microneedling and put on the face or injected into the face. Same concept, but the thought process behind it is to use your own growth factors and your own stem cells to upregulate hair growth. And I can share with you some, from my husband and from my father, that are great. And it really does. I don't love hurting patients, and it's a lot of needles in the scalp, and we give laughing gas and things to make it much more tolerable. And most patients do fine with that. Women obviously are a little bit more pain tolerant than men.
I was going to ask, are the women way more tough in your practice?
Way tough. And I've seen that in front of my father, who's a doctor. He's a great patient. And my husband might be one of them. He's not a wimp. All the techniques that we use to try to take away pain, we call it talkesthesia, where you try to keep their mind off of it and talk about positive. He's hip to my game, and he just wants us to be quiet, and he'll shush me and my assistant I'm like, this is what I do. Like, let me do it. But anyway, I digress. So PRP.
But if your dad is a doctor and doing PRP, then PRP probably must be the best thing that you can do for hair growth or hair loss. Is that your opinion?
I feel like for now, it's for as far as aside from a hair transplant or something that's like ultimate cure, because you're replacing with hairs from the posterior hairline that you'll never lose. It's an in-office procedure that gives us the most benefit. I am testing one in 2 weeks, a new one that's using shockwave and ultrasound to drive in the serum instead of having to inject it. And that is the before and afters are incredible that they presented. Obviously, I want to try it first and see. It's called TED, TED, and the company is called Alma. You can use that or not. I have no connection to this company, but anything that is like going to help me out my patients, I'm fully interested in. I did a fellowship in lasers after I did my residency. So and we have 7 floors on Fifth Avenue, like the Taj Mahal of beauty, where we've got 3 floors, there's 5 ORs, and so we're very tech driven. So anything that's new, and if I can get better results and don't have to do thousands of injections into the scalp, like that's a win-win for me. So that would be worth for my patient. So
what about just like the topicals? Well, I'm curious about the topicals you see on TikTok. I'm talking like almond oil, argan oil, rosemary oil.
Yeah.
Like,
this
feels way more like in the universe of probably not going to work.
It's definitely in the holistic approach. And in our literature, even castor oil has been found to help with eyebrow growth and eyelash growth. Rosemary oil, all of these oils, well, rosemary in particular is a vasodilator, so it causes more blood flow to the area. So that's the thing we're helping to improve. So all of these things, have some science behind them. And if someone is fully vetted to just a very holistic, natural approach, then these are things that I will recommend, or certainly when I'm being interviewed by certain magazines or sites that really want to approach. Sure. I can't imagine, I don't wash my hair that often. I cannot imagine, rubbing in rosemary oil every night to my scalp in order to, and it needs to be pretty persistent with a one treatment.
There's one individual, on TikTok who has been sharing his hair growth story over the last year. And I think he has been approaching it through a holistic lens primarily. And his results over the course of a year, 18 months, are really astonishing. But it's also hard to know, like, is that just anecdotal for one person? He just happens to like respond to it really well. Or, are these results that everybody can expect? And I think that does kind of bring us back to the conversation of
Like we need,
what you do,
yeah, you need an end
in your practice.
one in the study, right? Because anecdotally, what if he had COVID and he'd lost a lot of hair and now it's regrowing,
Right.
attributing it to, there are a lot of reasons, but if you get a big number of people so that's why
Hmm.
you always want to scale studies because you can prove a lot of theories with like five.
Yeah, with 1 to 5. I completely agree with you. Okay, so on to our final question, matters of the heart. And this, we talk about anti-aging on the show a lot, and I think aging is emotional, right? I'm 37. I'm starting to notice new things about me. It's hard. And I know for some people they cruise through aging and it doesn't affect their self-esteem or how they see themselves, but I think for a big portion of the population, facing our reality, right, is challenging. And it can be really emotional and trigger a lot of feelings. And I mean, the anti-aging industry is massive, right? Like,
For a reason,
we're all
right? Yeah.
for a very
In
obvious
bother than
reason.
most of us, I don't think it would be, destroying.
Correct. Yeah. So
And I'm
I don't have to wax poetic about
no,
that,
I
but
I agree. I mean, we're in a very safe space here with not wanting.
yeah, we are in a safe space. We may not be in a safe space in the comments
Right.
on
I know.
this video, but within this
Listen,
recording.
if anyone is upset about the fact that a lot of people don't want to age, me included, and I'm 40, I'm 10 years your senior, so I'm 47. I love you. That's great. Teach me your ways because I think that you're touching on something like when you're recognizing nobody wants to talk about their life ending. And when you're seeing
Yeah.
that play out physically, like we can't see the changes that are going on in our coronary arteries. If we could, maybe really upset by that too. But there's difference by being able to see, and that's what's so fun and awesome, and also potentially detrimental about dermatology is like our whole world is what you can see. And I love that about derm, but it also plays into a lot of the psychology of human behavior and human nature. I happen one of my majors in undergrad was psych, and my mom is a therapist, so I come from a very like I feel like I'm well equipped to help people to navigate that. But that doesn't mean that I'm immune to it either. And there's like every day you're like, oh, whether it's the gray hair or a fine line or wrinkle that wasn't there, it just reminds you of you know time passing. And I have two little children who every day I'm like, oh, I'm kind of an older mom who wants to be around for them for as long as I can be in the best way that I can be. So I think that it's interesting in this time, if we really want to throw all the psych into it, you would think with like COVID and the world ending and the state of the, like you would think that most people would have given up and been like, I don't care anymore. Like it doesn't matter. The world's a dumpster fire. But instead, this huge uptick in people seeking different ways to look better because I think one, we feel out of control with the state of the universe. And this is something we actively do to control something that makes us feel better. Because when we look better, we do feel better. And in the reverse, like have you ever been to a party and you go to the bathroom and you thought you looked cute and you go in and you're like, oh my gosh, is this what I look like? Maybe it's bad light or whatever. And it kind of changes your outlook. But that the reverse is true as well. Like if you feel like you look better, you tend to behave better, and it permeates all aspects of life, whether it's your relationships, your work production, and your happiness. So I don't demonize people for wanting to look their best. I made a career trying to help
Yeah.
do that.
Me neither. I completely agree with you. I really struggle with like very like binary black and white opinions on this stuff because obviously if you have a opinion that you don't need Botox and like how dare you do that or you shouldn't do lasers, to me you're invalidating the experience of others that you just don't understand, right? And so, I think that all of this stuff is valid for the people that are interested in it. So if you're about to jump into the comments and be like, how dare you? Perhaps just consider that there are other people out there that have had different experiences than you that shape their worldview differently. And for them, making choices or decisions like this, it could be completely valid. So that's what I want to say before we go into our anti-aging conversation. Okay, so now I want to talk about topicals. And this is a controversial subject. Well, maybe it's not controversial, but for me, I threw away my Trenton like a month ago. And there's this trend right now of like moving away from really harsh topicals to very like calm, soothing ingredients in the anti-aging space. And I want to know if I have made a mistake by throwing away my like retinoid, whatever it is. Because honestly, Dr. Denny, my skin could just not get comfortable with this. Like no matter how I tried over time, it was always red, like dry, whatever. I was like, I just can't get into a groove with this. I feel like it makes me look worse instead of better. I'm not seeing these incredible results over time because I can't stick with it. And so I'm just going to go back to like calming, soothing skincare.
So I think that you're touching on something that a lot of my patients come to me with, and it's not fair, right? If you only hear about the holy grail of anti-aging, which is vitamin A derivatives, whether it's retinoids, retinols, well, not retinaldehyde, all of those are under the umbrella of vitamin A. Then you feel like you're missing out, or that you're not doing yourself the ultimate service by having
the right thing. Yeah.
So I hear that often, and I do two things. One, if you want to stay away from vitamin A in general, by all means, there are other, less harsh ingredients that do work in similar ways, like bakuchiol, for example. And I'm fine with a loving skincare. What I often see is people overdoing it. They're putting on like 20% glycolic and retinoid that is like 0.1% tretinoin, and using, a scrub, and they're beating up their skin barrier. And there is a concept in the anti-aging space of chronic inflammaging, which is like if you're producing inflammation all the time in the skin, it may be accelerating your signs of aging. So along those lines.
That is very interesting. Is that like what the tweens at Sephora are doing? But they're using all these high, like active ingredient skincare before they need it?
Yes. They're all, every mom is like, please come up with a skincare line for my teenager, because they're all using these actives that they don't need. And then they're disrupting their skin barrier. Then they're getting breakouts. Then they're dry, they're irritated, they're red, everything burns. So we do want to keep our skin as happy as possible. And it is a fine line between using ingredients that are good for the skin and may upregulate collagen, elastin, and help and be helpful for resisting aging. Or, I often say, lean into the loving, nurturing ingredients at home and really care for your skin. And like any of the heavy lifting, like let's do that together, whether it's a peel in office or a laser or some treatment that really is the, way more impactful in the long run, than things you're going to do at home. And so you leave the heavy lifting to me, and at home, you just love and nurture your skin and protect the skin barrier and keep it like as happy as possible, because the skin is amazing at keeping bad stuff out and good stuff in. But when we start to like really disrupt the barrier, then that's when we start to see sensitivities and people start to break out, and they're like sensitive to products that they never were before. But that's because their barrier isn't intact, and they're not having their skin in the healthiest state.
What did you call it? I can't say that word, but you can.
Like inflammation, but then inflammation.
Inflammaging.
There you go.
Inflammaging. This is going to be a clip on
but I will say,
media.
For a fun, start looking for this and you're going to see it. There is, for those who, and tretinoin is strong. So especially in this New York winter, it's like a lot to have to deal with. There is a newer ingredient that was written about in our derm journal, like the Journal of the American Academy of Dermatology, which is like the Bible for us in the space. And it's not even a aesthetics journal, but it was in 2018. It was discovered or elucidated, and it's called hydroxypanacolone retinoid, or HPR. And you are going to start to see that in a lot of skincare launches. And it activates RXR receptors instead of RAR receptors, which is what tretinoin and retinol do. And so you're getting the same retinoid activity, but without the irritation. And the reason that it took 5 years to come to market, because the ones that are here launched like last July, you're going to see a lot more of them, was obviously because of COVID and the delay in production. But it usually takes from when things are in our journals till they hit market, it's about 3 years. So little delayed with what went on globally. But
what's your favorite product with HPR in it?
One that I love, and in the clinicals I can speak to 100% of the participants who were retinol naive, meaning their skin had not been retinized or gotten used to vitamin A, because it's easier to switch within the category if your skin's already used to that ingredient. 100% of the trial participants had no irritation at day 1, week 1, week 2, week 4, week 8, and week 12. Yeah. That never happens with any retinol. On people who haven't, you don't have 100% of anyone who's like, yeah, I can tolerate it. And the fact that this is, a retinoid, but it doesn't cause irritation is amazing. My favorite one is newer. It's by Elizabeth Arden, and it's called Elizabeth Arden.
I see it. It's Elizabeth
Ceramide liner or cream.
I see it.
Feels really good. You use it last step, like as a cream, and the effects in the studies were amazing. But it's very well tolerated. So when I have a patient, if you'd come to me today, Lo, and we're like, I can't use it, I threw away my tretinoin, I'm just going to categorically demonize all vitamin A for the rest of my life, I would say
yes, because that's what I've done in my brain.
Yeah. So this one is still nice because you're having the ceramides in there. It's respecting the skin barrier, but you're getting the nuclear effects that are upregulating collagen, elastin, helping with fine lines and wrinkles, and it's pretty amazing.
Interesting. Yeah, but it's a little confusing because the description, like on a product like this, says it combines pure retinol with peptides. And so is the retinol that's being described here HPR?
No, it's not. And I said the same thing to them. And I really feel like that's a bit of a marketing play now because no one knows what HPR is. So if it's just HPR ceramide, people would be like, what is that? So I have asked that same question because I'm like, well, how are you not getting the irritation from the retinol that's in there?
Right. That's my question. Because now I want to go buy this.
Are pretty amazing in the results and in the tolerability.
Interesting.
So that's my favorite, and you're going to see it. HPR is going to be the new ingredient that is going to be replacing a lot of retinol launches. I would say I'm trend forecasting. You can quote me on it, and I may be wrong, but I anticipate that will be one to watch.
I love this. Okay, well, Elizabeth Arden, if you're listening, can you send us some of this? Okay, I'm going to try that. Thank you. Well, Dr. Dendy, this has been a really enlightening and interesting conversation. What else do you want to talk about and tell us?
Well, I feel like, we've touched on skin health and skin barrier and the importance of maintaining your overall skin health and hydration through not disrupting it with very strong glycolics and acids and retinoids, especially when you're 12, which is trying. But I was talking about maintaining your environment as well. And a lot of people work from home or pivoting from working from home, and the importance of especially when you have this dry heat and harsh winters that we're having, to increase your environmental humidity. That's really important. And so using humidifiers, which I feel like every person who's had a baby, you get one for your baby and then you stop using them because they're gross and you can't clean them and they get moldy and you're like, I'm not going to do that. And so there are some new ones on the market that are really good for helping to increase the ambient humidity in your space, whether that's in your work area or your bedside, but also helping to it's also good for your health. So in the world of cold and flu season and COVID, it actually is found that if you have more humidity in the air, that if you cough or sneeze, it will actually bind the viral particles and makes them heavier. So it pulls it out of circulation where you're not as prone to be passing these infectious particles back and forth. So good for skin, it's good for health, it's good for hair, it's good for scalp. And so that's something that I have at my bedside and at work. And the good thing about like some of the newer ones, there's one by Canopy that helps. You can throw the components in the dishwasher. So all
cool.
cleaning it is solved for, because I remember when my son was born, like my husband and I would kind of like fight over who had to clean the humidifier, like the last thing he wanted to get Q-tips and vinegar, and like nobody's doing that. Everyone has one and no one uses it. So that's a good way if you have eczema, psoriasis, dry skin, aging, or just even in the winter, you know how people will get like winter scalp or dandruff really. But it's worse in the winter. If you increase your humidity in your environment, it actually will benefit you in many ways, both internally and externally.
Makes a lot of sense. Awesome. This has been a great conversation. I so appreciate your time. Where can our listeners find you? They can come visit you in your practice in New York City, but where can everybody find you on the internet, ask you questions, all of the above?
So you can follow me on Instagram at Dr. Dendy, which is DRDENDY. And I work at Schaefer Clinic on 5th Avenue. And, you can always DM me or ask me any questions, and I will help you as much as I can.
I love that. Thanks so much for coming on and for your time.
Yeah, thank you. I've enjoyed it.
Everyone, please join me in saying a big thank you to Dr. Dendy Engelman for coming on the show today and just providing us with such interesting and important information on so many topics. I know that we've had a lot of medical experts on lately talking about some controversial stuff, and everybody has a different opinion on it, feels differently about all of these things. And that's the purpose of the podcast. That's the purpose of Gut Feelings, right? To get to the heart of the matter, to understand different perspectives, and to really dive into this stuff so that we can choose to do it, choose not to do it. You make the best decisions for your body. So thanks for listening and joining me for this episode. If you have a head, heart, or health question, email us at gutfeelings@lovewellness.com. You can DM me or Love Wellness, or you can leave the question on our show's social posts in the comments. And please don't forget to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. 2024 is going to be the year of the Gut Feelings podcast. I promise we're going to have some incredible experts on the show this year. I am Lo Bosworth, and I will chat with you all next time on Gut Feelings.